Hello, I'm Dr. Aixa Goodrich. Back in 2007, you may remember that Oprah created some controversy when she invited a doctor on her talk show to argue that hypothyroidism may be the result of repressed emotions. For the many millions of women with hypothyroidism in America, the idea that their disorder could be a byproduct of repressed anger was a true wake-up call. But as you can imagine, conventional medicine had the opposite reaction and called the notion just pure insanity. But here we are 13 years later, and we've learned so much more about the thyroid. Now, conventional medical thinking on the thyroid and emotions has always been a one-way street. If your thyroid is underactive, it will make you depressed, moody, and fat. If it's overactive, it can make you anxious and cold and rail thin. But the thyroid is just so much more complicated than just symptoms. And that's what conventional medicine does not understand. Now let's start by taking a look at what anger does to the body. At the most basic level, anger is a threat response, the fight in fight or flight. Okay? The experience of anger is associated in part with the chemistry of stress hormones, such as cortisol and norepinephrine and epinephrine, which most of us know as adrenaline. But let's focus on cortisol. Cortisol is the most important of these thyroid true thyroid function. It's long been known that cortisol can influence thyroid-stimulating hormone, otherwise known as TSH, in that excess cortisol can suppress TSH, which then causes the thyroid to produce less of its key hormones, and ultimately, chronic cortisol release from ongoing stress can lead to autoimmune thyroid disease. So I want to stress the burst of cortisol shouldn't impact thyroid function under short-lived burst. It's the ongoing and chronic stress response that alters the thyroid function. But in our modern world, we're constantly under threat from a barrage of sources, especially conflicts and demands that seem to never go away and problems that can't be solved. So our fight or flight response is almost constantly turned on. So since there's no stopping stress, suppression of thyroid function then becomes more and more likely too. And this fight response does more than just suppress the thyroid's hormone output. It can also trigger an immune response, which can lead to permanent damage to the thyroid gland. But we started this conversation talking about repressed anger. So what does repressed emotions have to do with this, right? Well, many Eastern energy healing systems consider the thyroid to be the seat of the throat chakra and important for creativity and self-expression, essentially your voice in both the literal and emotional sense. So it's no surprise to practitioners of traditional Chinese medicine that a hoarse voice is one of the key symptoms of thyroid dysfunction. So what happens when you are angry but stop yourself from expressing or experiencing it, you're basically swallowing your anger. And that's a metaphor for what you experience when you don't express your angry feelings or your emotions. But in a very real sense, it's like taking a poison pill. So because where are you stuffing all those emotions? You're basically swallowing them. You're stuffing them down your throat past your self-expression center and right down into your gut, essentially, which coincidentally is where 70% of your immune system lives. So the sick feeling in the pit of your stomach after an intense emotional experience, an argument, or some other experience is the feeling of repressed anger or emotions. So perhaps you've experienced this in other ways too. So let me give you an example, such as like clenching your jaw or tightening your throat, or a cold and tightening feeling in your chest or in your stomach. Or you may experience difficulty swallowing, or perhaps even shortness of breath, or a feeling of like breathlessness, like you can't catch your breath, right? So these are all physiological stress responses as well as response to anger. So part of healing your thyroid gland is getting to the root cause. I have learned that we must look at each person from a physical, an emotional, and spiritual perspective. So my functional medicine programs include life coaching. I dig, discover, and then together we solve. So are you ready to heal your thyroid? If you are, call me, 305-271-7447. We can schedule your consultation, because if not now, then when? It's not going to get better on its own. Otherwise, it would have already. I want to also remind you to follow me on Instagram and on Facebook, Just search Manifest Your Epic Life for more information and inspiration. I'm Dr. Aixa Goodrich, adding years to your life and life to your years.